Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation about co-responsibility in parish and the life of formation programs. I'll be speaking a little bit about that from my experience working in parish life primarily. I do direct the campus ministry program that serves Michigan State University, but through a parish, through a merged parish community. So back in the day, in the 1920s, our community got started through a Newman Club on Michigan Agricultural College's grounds that later became Michigan State University. So the first presence in East Lansing of Catholicism really was student-oriented. As time went on, the local clergy purchased land about a mile away from Michigan State University and built a big family parish, which was a huge blessing to the East Lansing community as it grew and grew. And then in the 1950s, they spun off a new student parish, which was the hot thing to do in the 1950s. And a student parish was meant to more directly focus on the needs of the students, while the major parish, St. Thomas Aquinas, met the needs of those permanent community members. But as time went on, the difference between the student parish and the community parish really grew. It grew a little polarized. And eventually in 2009, our local bishop decided to merge the two communities. And that has actually been a great gift to campus ministry and to myself as the director of campus ministry, because we've been able to immerse our college students not only in a vibrant campus ministry setting where they're surrounded by their peers and programming directed entirely at them, but we're also able to integrate them into a normal parish life where they are serving in liturgies, serving in all the missions of the parish, the elementary school, the Knights of Columbus, we have a Catholic elementary school, of course, and all of the youth ministries and children's ministries of the parish, which I think is a great model. Not every parish is going to be set up like that in a campus ministry setting, but it's a great model to help students understand their place in parish life, and so that when they can transition hopefully smoothly. So that's been a real gift to be a director in that context. So in addition to 10 years there, I did serve in a Catholic college for 2 years during my theological training and formation as a minister. That was at the University of Dayton. And prior to that, I did the ACE program here at Notre Dame, so I do have a love for Notre Dame in this community. I've also been very formed, as Carrie was generous to note, through a long affiliation with Leadership Roundtable, especially as a young adult. Through Leadership Roundtable, I learned and explored what's being done on the national and global level to create this greater culture of co-responsibility for our church, not only in personnel issues, human resources, but also fiscal management. Things that wouldn't normally be on the mind of a young campus minister when I was first starting out, but I was very grateful through that affiliation to be able to learn and grow and be associated with the ESTEAM program, which is Leadership Roundtable's young adult formation program that helps college students become aware and become co-responsible lay members of their parishes, nonprofits, and dioceses. So that's been kind of my context, the context that I have grown in as a person in ministry. Also, as a person in ministry, I have unfortunately experienced scandal in my local parish community. That scandal involved, some of our parish clergy. It was of a sexual nature and was extremely painful to those of us not only in the community but on the staff in particular. And I can easily say that experience of scandal was the most difficult year of my entire life. And of course you have to show up and smile and greet your people and have the dances for the college students and everything, while bearing really a nearly unbearable hurt of working in that context. So unfortunately, I have experienced not just the headlines, but the close-to-home reality of scandal that in some ways can be well handled and in other ways can be mishandled. So that's the context I bring as I speak a little bit about parish and formation cultures and co-responsibility. When Tim O'Malley from this wonderful McGrath Institute invited me to speak a little bit, he put in the email that the focus of this conference was to balance the roles of sanctifying, the role of sanctifying, teaching, and governing mission that is intrinsically associated with holy orders, and the responsibility of the laity to go forth and reach the peripheries. So really, what I'm going to do is break my talk down into those three areas: sanctifying, teaching, and governing, and share a little bit on my perspective of how clergy and laity can be co-responsible within each of those particular offices. So I don't have a handout for you. Kevin was a much better professor than I was, but I do have basic notes for each of these categories. So when we begin with the lens of sanctification in parish life or campus ministry life or diocesan life, I'd like to look first at the clergy and how, in many ways, the clergy have become encrusted, especially diocesan clergy, encrusted with administrative responsibilities that really draw them away from their ability to focus on sacramental life and take seriously the irreplaceable nature of this responsibility. Only clergy, only those gifted with sacramental holy orders have this responsibility within our hierarchical communion. And this is, it's critical that we recognize this, and we create an environment where the clergy can really claim that role and use it to serve the people of God in the most appropriate way. The first point I'd like to make is the prioritizing the availability of the sacraments. This is really kind of basic, and I served on a youth and young adult task force in our diocese where we talked about this, and the fact that through so many years, sacramental cycles really haven't changed much. You go to confession Saturday at 3, and if you can't go to confession Saturday at 3, you're not going to confession, right? So our Youth and Young Adult Task Force at the diocese said, this isn't working for most people. And if you look at campus ministry centers, we personally have a schedule where we have confession and adoration on Monday and Wednesday at 4 p.m., on Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m., and then on Friday at 11 a.m. And then, of course, we do have our Saturday, you can't miss it, 3 p.m. Opportunity for confession. Otherwise, the church would fail, right? So in suggesting, this is what's working for this generation, and this is the generation that we're fearing that we will lose. So why isn't the rest of the diocese looking at expanding its sacramental schedule to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the most number of people possible? A gentleman, Pete Burak, on this committee with me, he lit up when he heard that there was 7:30 p.m. confession and 8:45 p.m. Mass. He said, as a young dad, I can't get to confession. My wife and I could split and take turns, and we'd be able to go to confession and daily Mass once a week if we had a schedule like that available to us. But they don't, where they are in the diocese. So encouraging clergy to look at what is the sacramental schedule. This is a really basic, practical thing. Whether in a region, you don't all have to do all the same thing. But if here at St. Mary's we can cover Tuesday at 6 p.m., maybe next door at St. Anne's you can cover Wednesday at 7 p.m., So a little bit of collaboration in those basic availability of the sacraments would be a move forward, especially as we talk about ministering to new generations on new timetables. My second point is really to integrate liturgy with local programming and seasons. Liturgy is the primary contact with the majority of the people of God. There just isn't another way that we encounter so many people as church than Sunday at 10 a.m. or Saturday at 4:30 p.m. When we are able to have our clergy seek the needs of the people and the timing within the maybe academic year or within the needs of the local community. For example, Michigan State went through a scandal on campus regarding the Nassar issue, sexual abuse of gymnasts and student athletes. When that was happening, that would have been a perfect time for a liturgy of healing, some sort of opportunity for the community to come together and pray. We never did that, and that was an opportunity that was missed, to use our ability to pray and to lead and to gather people together and to reach the heart through the sacraments, through the liturgy. Also, I recently was speaking to our college student interns about music, and we were talking about, what kind of music does your generation appreciate and versus other generations, and one of them was like, I'll praise and worship all the time, and Other people said, we prefer hymns, and, all the students had a different preference, to be honest. And I talked about how when you understand the background of a hymn, for example, Lead Kindly Light, that was written right here on this campus. Beautiful hymn about John Henry Newman's beautiful, beautiful prayer, Lead Kindly Light. I know the history of that poem. I can imagine him standing on the deck of a ship, looking out and writing this beautiful prayer in praise of the Lord, and asking the Lord to intercede, in his life. And knowing that deepens the richness of that hymn for me. But the students were like, how did you learn that? Who told you that? Where did you find that out? If I knew that hymn would mean something for me too, And it made me think of how disintegrated our liturgies really are when we have a director of music who looks at the gospel and picks the music. And then we have a priest who looks at the gospel and starts preaching. And there's really no dialogue in between. It's an incredible missed opportunity for the formation of the laity, again, through the liturgy. And again, that is the primary responsibility of our clergy. Finally, a look at the challenges of the community to administer the sacraments for healing and strengthening of the Christian person. In particular, I'm thinking of the Sacrament of Reconciliation here. Every generation faces new challenges. And one thing that is incredibly prevalent in our culture that wasn't prevalent even 25 years ago is the use of pornography and other distractions involving digital devices. These issues are really crippling, especially to a young generation whose psychosexual development is being almost governed from pre-adolescence on through the use of pornography. But very often there's so many fears about boundaries, there's fears about how to address this, there's fears about coming on too strong, and there's fears about completely ignoring the subject. It is a very difficult and subjective issue to respond to in the confessional, no doubt. But these types of sexual challenges or digital challenges, new challenges of new generations, really require the clergy to look and discuss and seek new pathways and best practices to how they can serve and help heal and strengthen a generation through sacramental life. So that's the clergy. On to the laity, who have the responsibility to sanctify the world. Actually, a bigger responsibility. A little more laid on our shoulders. To begin, I thought of this line from an old kind of Christian pop song by Danielle Rose: to live a life of such love as to be a reason to believe. That sums up the role of the laity, and I can sit down, right? To live a life of such love as to be a reason to believe. I want to grab the quote that I didn't catch who Archbishop Fisichella attributed this to, but there was a quote: men who make God credible in this world. We need men who make God credible in this world, and certainly women as well. Maybe the women are already doing it, I'm not sure. But this is the role of the laity. We are baptized to sanctify the world, to return mystery to the world through our life in vocation, in our lay vocations, to pray, to prioritize service and charity, to grapple with Catholic social teaching. We strengthen and support vocations of family and friends and clergy, those who are single, those who are not. We mutually support one another. We create a network to lift one another up. We sanctify local communities and local government. We sanctify our workplaces when we act with mercy, and particularly those who have businesses or manage businesses and manage people. You can manage and own a business and set up a business or a corporation in such a way that there is mercy in the workplace. And we can be signs of faith in the public space through public prayer, or even the most simple use of sacramentals. Those are very easy, small things. More challenging, I think, is to live the life of the laity through our vocation, especially state and life vocation, which for many members of the laity is marriage and family. Choosing time together and worship can really create those connections between generations that are slipping away. when we show the right respect to sports and the arts and leisure and work versus idolatry of those very topics, we can, as families, show the world the right place for all of those goods. We can choose one another's eyes over digital devices. And actually, parents can choose home over workaholism, which is really championed, especially in American culture. Another thing that the laity are called to do is to contribute to cultures of discernment and prayer, to encourage all state and life vocations, and all state and life vocations build up the institution of the church. So when we are able to, my best friend introduced me to my husband, and she's a consecrated woman. She's actually a consecrated virgin. And at some point she said, "Diller, you got to find a man." And I was like, I'm so busy. And she introduced me to Brett. And it was such a gift. It was such a gift to both of us, and it really didn't take long for us to, in our mid to late 30s, fall in love and get married and start a family. All of that within 2 years, a real whirlwind. But I'm grateful to my friend for building up my church by adding a husband to my life. So in those ways, we really do support one another and create this culture of vocation that serves the church. So that's sanctification. I want to turn fairly quickly to my next topic, which is teaching offices. Noting first and foremost that there have been very few reliable structures for or reliable reinforcement of catechesis in the millennial and now zennial generation, or Gen Z, or whatever you want to call it. Specific to campus ministry, some students come to us from solid Catholic schools or homeschooling communities with a strong sense of Catholic identity and teachings, but truthfully, most recall very little from their religion classes or Sunday school workbooks. Unfortunately, even less is reinforced at home or in vibrant Catholic communities and families. So really the best way that we can reach the majority of the people of God in terms of teaching really is preaching, and that would be Sunday preaching and homilies. So I want to speak a little bit about that. The highest priority should be given to homily prep by our clergy that privileges best practices in public speaking. And I'd say not too long. Unfortunately, I was given 30 minutes, so I have to. But no homily should be 30 minutes. Please spare us. There should be well-supported points and a memorable takeaway, hopefully something actionable. Secondly, and that should be fairly obvious, but it's certainly not always the lived experience for every Catholic Christian. The second point would be to really know your community, their interests, fears, and the blessings and challenges of the particular age group in their time and place. So if you're preaching to a college campus ministry community, please speak to the 18 to 22-year-olds in the place that they are in their life. Please don't. In the fall, there was somebody preaching about Anne and Joachim and the vocation of grandparents, which you could make relevant to college students, but he didn't. So trying to see the people in front of you really should be the top priority for the clergy. And then third, really focusing on the gospel, but recognizing that one homily once a week isn't all the teaching that the people of God need. So trying to find ways in partnership with your lay employees, your lay staff, to network aspects of that Catholic teaching that you're trying to touch on with the community life, with the programming available, instead of having programming be some arm completely unattached to the preaching, which unfortunately too often is what we experience. When we see that masterful linkage of homilies, I do want to champion. We've got an associate pastor at my parish who gave a beautiful homily on Ash Wednesday about how we come together as groups, either in athletics or exercise or studies, and we do these things together because we're more accountable, we're more successful in groups. And he connected that to our Evangelical Catholic small group kickoff that was happening during that very service. And that linkage was critical to helping students understand, as Lent, as Catholics, why do we do this all together? Why are we doing this at once? But also, why should you go on to do more of it, perhaps through this ongoing programming? That reinforcement meant the world to those of us who were lay ministers, pushing that program and supporting it. And it also hopefully met the needs of the gospel and the preaching of that day. I will say, to be relevant in our time and place is challenging. On Sunday, a friend and colleague who attended my master's in theology program wrote about being almost done with mass attendance because the priest, wherever she was, preached about Bernie Sanders and how it's just something to do with his campaign in a very negative light, but didn't take the opportunity for reciprocal commentary on irregularities in Christian values of other candidates. And she took some issue with that, but she was tired. She was tired of a poorly crafted homily. Likewise, a few years ago, after the Supreme Court case that decided in favor of same-sex marriage across the nation, my parents were visiting my brother and sister-in-law, who were limited mass goers already. My sister-in-law is not Catholic. And so my brother and sister-in-law attended mass with my parents, and the young priest, unfortunately, didn't present that topic in the homily in the most loving light. And my sister-in-law walked out and has never returned to attend mass with our family. We still wait in joyful hope that my 2-year-old niece will be baptized, who was born after that event. But the effects of poorly handling issues without knowing the community, their interests and fears, can be devastating. It can be the lack of sacramental life, really, for a new generation. I do want to mention one of my favorite pastors who's been mentioned already today, Father Bob Beloin, who was a master of homiletics at Yale. And I will never forget a homily that he gave on torture as a young adult. I was 24, and he did a masterful job of talking about the difficulties of torture or enhanced interrogation techniques that were relevant at that time, about 14 years ago. He balanced the political perspectives and was gentle and careful with the way that he grappled with this very difficult intersection of faith and current events. But at the same time, he really promoted this campaign of torture as a moral issue and encouraged the students and community members to act and to leave that mass ready to do something, or ready to pray, or ready to think hard, at least, about the issue. As a 24-year-old, I was captivated, motivated, and inspired. I was ready to do something, and I didn't know what to do, but I thought I would write my home bishop, the bishop of my home diocese, and encourage him to act by joining the many other churches, Catholic and otherwise, who are participating in this torture as a moral issue campaign. This homily was so compelling, as were almost all of his homilies. I really wanted to act. And my local bishop had the generosity to write me back, but he told me that, and this is almost a quote that will never leave my mind, he has passed from this life since, but he told me, we can't just jump on every bandwagon that rolls through town. And that showed me something as a young adult about our church and our church's ability to act, and when and how we might take courage. So, clergy, preach as though you are trying to tilt the world on its axis. Laity, when it comes to teaching, it's our responsibility to find creative avenues to teach that may be outside the norms of that which we've experienced until now, and also celebrate, but sometimes eliminate dead ends. A colleague of mine I was talking to actually on my drive down was talking about how theology on tap is not going well in her diocese, and that it may be time to bring it to an end, even though it has been a good in the past. It's just not successful in the here and now. And I was like, yeah, kill it. Why keep doing something that's only has 6 people and is costing you thousands of dollars? We have to be courageous as lay people. The opportunity to mentor for vocational success and co-responsibility in parish life is really critical. This can only come from the laity, really. Those who mentor couples that are preparing for marriage, that's a role that can't be replaced. Those who mentor younger people as they come onto boards. Carrie mentioned how we must champion putting young adults on every Catholic nonprofit, diocesan, and parish board, whether it's pastoral, finance, whatever it takes. We have to integrate young voices into leadership in those ways. But that doesn't mean that we just stick somebody on the board because they're somebody else's, son or daughter. We find a young adult who has skills, a burgeoning skill set, maybe not a complete skill set, but we have the opportunity as lay people to take a young law student and have the lawyer mentor them and teach them what it means to be on a Catholic high school board or what have you. And then finally, we do have the right and responsibility to bring our concerns and cultures to the clergy to help them align parish offerings. In the end, we do have a hierarchical communion, and our clergy are responsible for setting our direction. But they cannot do that well without knowing what the concerns of the community really are. Finally, I do want to speak about governance. And I don't want to run through this too quickly, but I do know Kevin will be hitting some of these points as well. So first of all, ensuring formation of clergy really includes healthy boundary training. I've had positive and negative experiences of this as a lay campus minister. In some cases, I've had to call out young clergy for engaging in behaviors that they may or may not have understood violated boundaries with a vulnerable adult population. I say vulnerable adult because 18 to 22-year-olds do not have they have a new support system around them, not a stable support system. So a one-on-one meeting in a bar with an undergraduate woman is not an ideal place to conduct counseling. And when I, as a lay director, unfortunately bore the responsibility of challenging this, it was not comfortable, nor was it terribly successful in the immediate realm. At the same time, I've been blessed with conversations with equally young clergy who were just ordained and were seeking to know how to best do campus ministry and how to do it safely and how to make sure that the boundaries that they created with their students were healthy. Unfortunately, in both cases, these men came fairly recently from ordination, not having discussed these things in their seminary life, which to me was shocking and problematic when the first conversation that someone had about alcohol and undergraduates was with a lay campus minister and not with their formator in seminary. I would have hoped that would have happened before and it wouldn't have fallen to my shoulders, which in some cases can be vulnerable as a layperson. Secondly, I want to say that clergy do have the responsibility as the heads of hierarchical communions to hire well. That means not just hiring someone who is, popular or, a young person in their community that could be a great youth minister because they're nice, but really looking for and investing in people who are well trained, theologically trained, formed in ministerial best practices and pastoral boundaries. This is critical, and making sure that they're properly compensated professionals. This may involve some stretching or some collaborating, but it's important because we do see a crisis of youth and young adult involvement in parish and church life. But we also see this constant rotation of sometimes poorly trained youth and young adult ministers who are expected to work very complicated time structures and very quickly burn out of the field. So investing well in people who are well trained and investing well in their compensation package is critical. Co-responsibility in investment in clergy has looked like fully funding seminary education and post-ordination advanced degrees. Yes, a small salary package, but supplemented by housing, room and board, largely comfortable spaces close to work, car insurance, health insurance, disability and long-term insurance, assisted living insurance, insurance that covers drug or alcohol rehabilitation multiple times, possibly, in or outpatient psychological care, mileage to and from all ministerial destinations, clothing and book stipends, food stipends, grocery budget, funds for ongoing professional development and retreats, and in some cases, even Netflix is covered, although I have to pay for my own, sabbatical programs, and then there are gifts on top of that, and that's okay. I'm not saying that one single cent or part of that benefit package should be taken away. But co-responsibility by our clergy for our lay staff should also look like a living wage that grows with the skill set of the lay minister, health insurance that covers as thoroughly as it does for the clergy, including things like, recent things that are recently on my mind, like prenatal and early childhood care, maternity and paternity leave. Very often, lay men receive no paternity leave whatsoever. And then ongoing education and opportunities for those of limited socioeconomic means to study and be formed as persons in ministry so that we can expand the diversity of our ministerial workforce. That would be some responsibilities of governance. And then also, finally, I'm running out of time here. I want to turn this over to Kevin. But it's also important, as we face in so many communities, especially in the Midwest, parish closures and mergers, it's important that real data is shared with our people. It is painful for a community to experience the merger or closure of their parish, critically painful. At the same time, these things often happen seemingly out of the blue, where trends in number of clergy, the funding of a particular parish, the funding of a particular school, mass counts, Sunday collections, these trends are known. But unfortunately, the narrative that is communicated, sometimes through diocesan communication directors or through clergy and preaching, is that everything's fine. Don't mind the people to your right and left who no longer exist in your pew. It's very important that honesty be the first step in managing change. And we have to be careful that the narratives that we tell about our church really are the truth. Because I think in general, the people of God they may be pained by the loss of something, but they also can understand it better and prepare for it well when they're given the data that they need. In terms of the laity, it is our responsibility to hold the institution accountable for community and fiscal management, and to support the community through time, talent, and treasure. So we do need to make sure that systems are in place. But it is our responsibility to get up and be a Eucharistic minister, a lector, and put money in the collection basket. That is our responsibility. And finally, to evaluate and honor the realities of changing communities while we celebrate the historical blessings that have occurred. We have to learn as laity that there is a life and a death cycle within our church, and that learning that will be helped by honest dialogue from our leaders.